Warning: these social media platforms may be hazardous to your health. Censorship kills. Pain coming. This has been a PSA by Breaking Spectre. Good morning, everybody. How we doing? Spectre here. Another edition of In Case You Missed It news here for this 16th day of December, Thursday. Hopefully you guys survived, depending where you were in the country last night, as we had some pretty frenetic weather and that blow through, literally blow. Doggone, it was extremely windy here in these parts. We'll get into that here a little bit later on here. But on the broadcast here this morning, we're going to get into some financials, a lot of financials actually here yesterday to today. We're going to talk about the old Santa rally. We'll talk about the big disappointment in retail sales. Former Fed governor blasting Powell, things of that nature. Lira over in Turkey is imploding. Silver on sale. IBM and Samsung apparently got a joint venture going where they're developing chips. Air freight rates. We're going to get into vaccine mandates and the great resignation. And of course, initial jobless claims report is out this morning. And then, on top of that, on the back half of the broadcast, we're going to get into a lot of the storm damage that occurred from the storms that blew through. So I'm kind of going to do a split broadcast, if you will. For front half, we'll hit some of the financials. Back half, we'll talk about a lot of the storms that blew through, hit various states, and the ensuing damage. So all that being said, stick around. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, Spectre here. Just wanted to give a big thank you to all you guys who continue to support my work. Jump in, day out on the streams, support all the various pieces I put out, etc., etc. And in doing so, I figured what the heck, we'll put some merch out there if you guys wish to continue to support and help defray some of the costs of streaming, which many of you guys know many of us incur. Got a handful of shirts and that here. Spectre Does News. We got the Realize, Real Lies shirt and that you hear on my PSA periodically. And of course the No BS insignia from the show I do over on the 5x5 channel, all of which you can get for the low price of $19.99. Aside from that, you can get the Let's Go Brandon #FJB shirt as well in a variety of colors. And I've recently added the hoodies in a variety of colors you can get right there as well. And last but not least, you can grab yourself a No BS shirt and the Zip Up hoodie as well. If you don't want any articles of clothing, well, you can grab yourself a mug or a 20-ounce water tumbler if you wish. Your choice. And of course, as always, just want to thank you, the listeners, the audience, those who are in chat day in, day out. Thank you for your continued support. All right, welcome back, everybody, and right into it we go here this morning. Looking at the old maps here, this is a radar as of about, just a little bit ago. Got a lot of scatter net coming across the upper northwest and across the plains and that coming across here. We got a little bit left over from the storms last night, pushing off to the east. There you kind of see that band as it's still pushing across. Precipitation-wise, don't know that it's really bringing all that much rain. Last night we saw, and we'll get into this later on, some of the snow that was on the backside of this thing, and a little bit more. Aside from that, temperature-wise, yeah, this was the stuff that gave us the grief. We had plenty of warm weather yesterday. Even last night, it was still about 60 degrees at 10 o'clock at night. We had 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts and that. And mind you, this is 10 o'clock at night on December 15th. Kind of unheard of. And so here you see some of the 60-degree weather and that pushing out toward the east. And let's hope that we don't see a repeat of what happened last night here yet again today. So that being said, and we'll get into that in the back half, like I said. Financials here this morning. Santa rally is finally here. Futures hit all-time high day after Powell goes full. Jean-Claude Trichet says one day before what everyone knew would be a hawkish pivot by the Fed, the mood was dour with tech names tumbling and futures hanging on for dear life. One day after Jerome Powell confirmed he would go full Jean-Claude Trichet as the Fed would not only turbo taper into a sharply slowing economy, ending its QE program by March, but then proceed with hiking rates as many as 3 times in 2022, more than the 2-hike consensus. And with the Bank of England shocking the markets moments ago with a surprise rate hike, and even the ECB trimming its turbo QE, and futures are at all-time highs. That's right. E-minis are higher by 140 points in 24 hours because, well, the Fed was more hawkish than consensus expected. At 8 a.m. Eastern Time, Dow E-minis were up 215 points, or 0.61%. S&P 500 E-minis were up 27.25 points, or 0.57%. And the Nasdaq 100 E-minis were up 100 points, or 0.61%. Here we see the graphic depicted there. Treasury yields jumped alongside European bonds after the Bank of England became the first major central banksta to raise rates since the pandemic, while the dollar fell and the pound jumped. The euro also hit session highs, with the ECB seemed to turn ever so slightly. There we go, more hawkish, as its monthly QE is set to shrink in the coming year. And some of the movers on the morning here, big tech stocks and banks led gains in pre-market trading. Shares in Tesla, Microsoft, Meta, and Amazon rose between 0.7 and 2.4%, with the lift pushing Apple shares nearer to an historic market value of $3 trillion. Think of how big that is, folks. How many countries that is bigger? How many countries does it take to get to $3 trillion by way of their GDP just to match what Apple is? Bank stocks, including JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup, all gained between 0.7 and 0.8%. Some of the biggest movers here today: Apple, as mentioned, and other big U.S. tech stocks rise after the Federal Reserve said that it would speed up its taper, joining in with a broader relief rally across risk assets. Apple shares are up 0.6%, with the stock drawing nearer to an historic market capitalization of $3 trillion. Also Thursday, Goldman Sachs said lead times for Apple's iPhone have declined in the latest week. Assertio shares rise 4% after the company announced the $44 million acquisition of the Otrexup device from Antares Pharma. Bluebird dropped 6% after the school bus maker provided a weaker than expected sales outlook. The company also offered $75 million worth of shares at $16 a share in a private placement. Danimer Scientific falls 10% after announcing that it plans to offer $175 million of convertible senior notes. Delta Airlines is up 2% after saying it expects to report a profit for the fourth quarter, citing strong demand for travel over the winter holiday period and a decline in jet fuel prices. Other airline stocks are also higher. DocuSign falls 2% as Morgan Stanley issued a downgrade, saying third quarter results changed the firm's view regarding the durability of growth through tough post-pandemic comparables. That's a mouthful. Fryer Battery gains 14% after executing its inaugural offtake agreement for at least 31 gigawatt hours of low-carbon battery cells. IronNet slumps 25% after the cybersecurity company's results fell short of expectations, prompting a street low target from Jefferies. Lennar Corp declined 6% after it reported a forecast for purchase contracts that was weaker than expected. Plug Power gains 5% after signing an agreement with Korean electric vehicle manufacturer Edison Motors to develop an electric city bus powered by hydrogen fuel cells. Syndax Pharmaceuticals falls 8% after pricing 3.2 million shares at $17.50 each. Tesla is up 2%, rising with other electric vehicle stocks amid a broader gain in technology stocks, and U.S. futures on hopes that the Federal Reserve's policy tightening will fight high inflation without hampering economic growth. And Wayfair falls 2% after Bank of America downgraded the stock to underperform, citing weak near-term data and difficult comparisons through the first quarter of 2022 for the online furniture retailer. And aside from that, down into the old market snapshot, S&P 500 futures up 0.5% to 47.34 and change. The stocks Europe 600 is up 1.2% to 476.39. Nikkei is up 2.1% to 29,066.32. The Shanghai Composite is up 0.8% to 36.7502. Brent futures are up 1% to 74.59 a barrel. Gold spot is up 0.5% to 17.8603 per ounce. U.S. dollar index down 0.36% to 96.16, and the euro is up 0.2% to 1.1316. Top overnight news out of Bloomberg. The greenback is set for its biggest annual gain in 6 years, and its rally appears to be far from over, market participants say. The prime mover, a hawkish Federal Reserve that's drawn a roadmap of interest rate increases over the next 3 years, while other central banks does look much more reticent to withdraw stimulus. The ECB is poised to unveil a gradual withdrawal from extraordinary scamdemic stimulus in the face of soaring inflation, whose path is further clouded by the Omicron coronavirus variant. The phenomenal pace at which the new COVID-19 Omicron strain is spreading across the UK will trigger a surge in hospital admissions over the holiday period, according to Bojo's top medical advisor. And take that for whatever it's worth. The Swiss National Bank kept both the deposit and the policy rate at negative 0.75%, as widely predicted by economists, with the global economic recovery on shaky footing due to the Omicron variant. Yes, the Omicron variant seems to be the purveyor of everything financial. Nasty little sucker. President Thomas Jordan and fellow policymakers also reiterated their pledge to supplement sub-zero rates with currency interventions as needed. France will impose tougher rules on people traveling from the UK, including a ban on non-essential trips and a requirement to self-isolate as it tries to slow the spread of the Omicron variant. IHS Markit said its index tracking output across the UK economy fell to 53.2 this month from 57.6 in November, reflecting weaker than expected growth in service industries, including hotels, restaurants, and travel-related businesses. Business-to-business services stalled. European power prices soared to records after Électricité de France SA said that 2 nuclear reactors will stop unexpectedly and 2 will have prolonged halts, just as the continent heads for a cold snap with already depleted gas inventories. Hungary's central bank increased the effective base interest rate for the 5th time in as many weeks to tackle the fastest inflation since 2007 and shore up the battered forint. More look at some of the markets out of News Squawk. Back over to Asia. Indonesia reports the first Omicron case in Jakarta facility. Asia stocks snap 4-day drop as traders take on risk after Fed. Shamayo Group shares set for best day in a month. Money manager vanishes with $313 million from China builder. Ruh-roh. And the hunt is on. Top European news, Britain's COVID resurgence cuts growth to slowest since lockdown. The S&B says franc is the highly valued as Omicron clouds outlook. Norway delivers rate hike that Omicron had threatened to derail. And Erdogan approves third capital boost for state banks since 2019. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Turkey and the Lira here in just a minute. On the event calendar today, lots going on at 8:30 a.m. this morning. We got a December initial jobless claims estimate of 200,000. Prior was 184,000. Continuing claims estimate of 1.94 million. Prior was 1.99 million. We also have November housing starts month over month, estimate of 3.1 versus down 0.7%. November housing starts, estimate of 1.57 versus a prior 1.52 million. November building permits month over month, estimate of 0.5%. Prior was 4%, revised to 4.2. November building permits, estimate of 1.66 million. Prior was 1.65. And we also have December Philadelphia Fed business outliers, estimate of 29.6, prior was 39. At 9:15 a.m., November manufacturing SIC production, estimate of 0.7, prior 1.2, with industrial production month over month, estimate of 0.6, prior 1.6. At 9:45 a.m., December market U.S. manufacturing PMI, estimate of 58.5, the prior print was 58.3. And also at 9:45 a.m., December market U.S. services PMI estimate of 58.8. Prior was a 58 even. So that is a quick rundown through the market here this morning. And yesterday we got this big disappointment in U.S. nominal retail sales for November. Says after October's big upside surprise print, U.S. retail sales are expected to slow their roll a little, but still rise for the third straight month, and Bank of America is in line with consensus. Analysts were right on direction, but significantly wrong on amplitude, as headline retail sales rose just 0.3% month over month, well below the 0.8% month over month expected. And here we see that depicted, that little nugget there right on the end. Says core retail sales also missed ex-autos and gas. The softer than expected report may reflect the pulling forward of holiday sales, as many Americans aware of supply chain slowdowns shopped earlier than usual. Or, as Bank of America noted last week, consumers have started to react to the Omicron variant. Are you noticing a theme here this morning? Dear God, how many times can we mention Omicron variant all across Europe? And, Omicron must be the reason why that they're going to hang their hat on for the reason for everything. Good Lord. Says total airline spending slipped noticeably to negative 15% on a 2-year basis, down 13% from the prior week. The weakness seems to be driven by cancellations of international trips. Indeed, Bank of America found a meaningful pickup in refunds from non-U.S. carriers and little change in refunds from domestic carriers. Most notably, Retail Sales Control Group, the data that feeds into GDP, actually shrank 0.1% month over month, massively missing the plus 0.7% expected. And there we see that little dip down. Barely see that in red there. It says finally, remember that retail sales are reported on a nominal basis, and thus it is unclear how much of the rise is simply due to inflation. The chart below, while overly simplistic given the vastly different weighting schemes, attempts to adjust retail sales monthly change for the shift in CPI. The picture is quite different. As adjusted for inflation, retail sales dropped in November. And, well, will today's print be considered in today's Fed decision? And judging by how the Fed rolled yesterday, with tapering up to $30 billion a month and 3 rate hikes, I would say that it probably did. So that being said, former Fed Governor Blas Powell says inflation is the Fed's choice. So think of that. Does the Fed really know how to control inflation or not, or are they just plain stupid? I don't know. But this out of Mike Shedlock's Mish Talk yesterday says inflation is a choice for which the Fed is chiefly responsible, says Kevin Warsh. And the Fed is the main inflation culprit. In a Wall Street Journal op-ed, former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh says the Fed is the main inflation culprit, emphasis mine. Inflation is a choice. It's a choice for which the Fed is chiefly responsible. The risk of an inflationary spiral arises when policymakers first dismiss the problem and then cast blame elsewhere. Gee, sounds like what the Dems do all the time, right? Projection. Inflation becomes embedded in the price formation process when the central bank acts belatedly or with insufficient conviction. To date, the Fed has acted as an enabler. The sure sign of a problem, when a president gives voice to the scourge of inflation and takes executive action, well before the central bank acknowledges the severity of the situation. Chairman Jerome Powell called low inflation, which averaged 1.7% in the prior decade, a mere 0.3 point below the Fed's target, the preeminent economic challenge of our time. So the Fed bet on a new policy regime to get inflation higher. It worked. It's not the first time a central bankster wanted a little more inflation and got a lot more. Last year, in another break with the president, the Fed loudly and explicitly endorsed a blowout in federal spending. Congress swiftly agreed. Federal spending increased from an average of about 21% of gross domestic product in the prior decade to more than 30% in fiscal 2020 and 2021. National debt relative to GDP increased from 79% in 2019 to more than 100% today. Most troubling, the Fed bankrolled the fiscal profligacy, purchasing more than half of the new Treasury debt issued this year. Call it monetary dominance. Achieving a soft economic landing at this late stage is difficult. If the sole task were to drive inflation down, the Fed would immediately taper its asset purchases and start raising rates. But a significant tightening cycle would likely cause market volatility to surge and assets to reprice. The authorities have expressed little concern about financial excesses, bubbles, or financial imbalances. Hope they're right. I expect tension between the Fed's goals of price stability and financial stability to be in sharper relief in the new year. So, too late for a wake up call? Well, says achieving a soft economic landing at this late stage is difficult, says Warsh, and an obvious understatement. Unfortunately, it's far too late for a wake up call. The bubbles have already been blown. This subject came up yesterday on Twitter. Shedlock says 100% spot on. The Fed blew another bubble and still doesn't see it. Assuming we need a Fed, which we don't, it should lean against speculation, but never does. How can it when it cannot see the bubbles of its own making? Exactly. Actually, the Fed should lean heavily into bubbles. They never do. The result is 3 massive bubbles in 21 years. Bubbles are inflation. More accurately, there should not be a Fed at all. The market would do a far better job setting rates than these clowns. And I echo those sentiments heartily. Biden needs to look in the mirror. President Biden is whining over inflation. He, too, is responsible. On December 13th, I wrote Biden's union push is a push for still more inflation. Everything Biden promotes is inflationary. Biden's big lie. Biden has the gall to say Build Back Better is not inflationary. Fortunately, Joe Manchin isn't buying the lie. Biden's Build Back Better plan is a provision requiring contractors to pay prevailing wages to qualify for federal tax incentives on green energy projects. Prevailing wages are union wages. Costs of all government projects will soar. Hypocritically, Build Back Better also has a energy tax credit for cars, but only if they are union made. You seeing a pattern here, folks? The same applies to solar. Despite climate change being the quote-unquote existential threat of our lifetime, only union solutions are allowed. That raises the price of cars, solar panels, batteries, everything, in fact. Orsh accurately commented, most troubling, the Fed bankrolled the fiscal profligacy, purchasing more than half of the new Treasury debt issued this year. Call it monetary dominance. Hopefully this comes up as a question in the Q&A following Wednesday's FOMC meeting. Regardless, the inflation cake is baked, and so is the resultant bubble bursting affair. Powell bears the most responsibility for this enormous bubble, as do Bernanke and Greenspan before him. And for what? To achieve a ridiculous 2% inflation target when the measurement excludes housing prices and asset bubbles. Of all the widely believed but patently false economic beliefs is the absurd notion that falling consumer prices are bad for the economy and something must be done about them. I have commented on this many times and have been vindicated not only by sound economic theory, but also by actual historic examples. And for discussion, please see Historical Perspective on CPI Deflations. How damaging are they? So bottom line, the Fed is the problem here. And throw on top of that the garbage that the Congress wants to put through with the Build Back Better stuff, and everything is going to lead to higher inflation. Just as they noted there, they listed out all the things that are, you only get this incentive if it's union made or whatever. And that's all going to have a knock-on effect. Aside from that, switching gears over to Turkey, we've talked a little bit about the lira imploding, and it continues to implode. Turkey proposes huge fines for hoarding. Yep, hoarding. You have too many liras in your pocket. Nope, no soup for you. On one hand, Turkey's currency is crashing because the country's ruthless despot refuses to allow higher interest rates in hopes the ensuing hyperinflationary collapse will cover his pillaging of Turkey's wealth, as he will simply blame foreign financial terrorists for what has been the biggest heist of Turkey's wealth in modern history. And sure enough, the Treasury fell another 2.75 percentage points today to a fresh all-time low ahead of tomorrow's insane rate cut by the Turkish central banksters, which will send the lira plunging even more in the coming days and spark even more hyperinflation. And there we see the US dollar versus the Turkish lira at fresh record low. Says, on the other hand, the local population, barred from exchanging their worthless lira into cryptos and effectively blocked from converting the local fiat into dollars and foreign currencies, is desperate to at least convert their rapidly depreciating pieces of paper into something tangible, like food, which of course leads to even higher prices and so on in your typical hyperinflationary spiral. And I guess I'll pause right there and think of how this could potentially play out even for the US dollar. Yes, it's a reserve currency all across the world. Yes, there are a lot of dollars floating out there outside the borders of the United States. But if it should ever get to that point, what if these yin yangs decide, oh, you can't convert your dollars to bullion or can't convert your dollars to crypto? And what do you think is going to happen? They're going to leave you to hold the bag, right? Don't think it can't happen here, folks. So, what is a scrambling Turkish government to do to prevent all out collapse? Apparently, it hopes to legislate away hoarding. According to T24, lawmakers from Turkey's ruling Justice and Development Party, the AKP, presented to Parliament a proposal for a new bill called for increased fines against hoarding of food and other goods. A perfectly natural reaction to idiotic government policies that have resulted in the lira losing 50% of its purchasing power in just the past year. And again, how much purchasing power does the US dollar really have when over the last 18-20 months the Federal Reserve has printed trillions into existence? Prior to this scamdemic, it had already lost 98% of its purchasing power. How much more have we lost because of our Fed here? The 8-article proposal calls for penalties ranging between 100,000 to 2 million liras, or approximately 7,000 to 144,000 US dollars, according to T24, and arrives as the country is faced with soaring inflation amid an economic downturn. The bill refers to practices by the producers, suppliers, and retailers that lead to bottlenecks, disequilibrium in the market, as well as activities that alter free competition, T24 said, calling for increased penalties that will serve as a greater deterrent to such moves. Inflation in Turkey climbed to an annual 20.7% in November, with food prices rising 27.1% on average, according to official data, as the country grapples with a plunging currency. So Turkey is up 27% on food inflation, and we talked about the other day that people expect all through next year that we're going to be at 10%. How long till we catch up? Shall we race? The Turkish lira has lost around 40% of its value this year as President Recep Tayyip Erdogan continues to double down on his unorthodox economic policy of keeping borrowing costs low. Erdogan has openly targeted stockpilers, blaming them for the surge in prices and threatening to impose more severe punishments. Of course, this is ironic to the point of lunacy. The only reason prices are surging is because Erdogan, who effectively controls the central bank with his personal appointees, is hoping to spark hyperinflation so the economy collapses and his pillaging of billions in Turkish wealth is not uncovered, while he quietly disappears to some tropical paradise with hundreds of bars of confiscated gold. Greedy businesses that stockpile more goods than needed are in part to blame for some sharp price spikes, T24 cited the Turkish leader as saying earlier this month. So how long until we see the folks in Turkey rise up and say they've had enough of this idiot Erdogan? And perhaps when the pressure is felt, the heat is really turned up, are we going to see him sitting on a tarmac getting ready to jump set, and kind of like what happened in Afghanistan here just a few months ago, try and hoard and steal so much cash that they literally had to leave bags on the runway? Stay tuned. Aside from that, silver on sale. Silver gold ratio is back above 80 to 1. This out of Shift Gold yesterday. The silver gold ratio has climbed back above 80 to 1. This is historically signaled silver on sale. And of course, there you see on screen here this morning, gold price is currently sitting at $17.90 and silver at $22.29, both of which are up on the morning here slightly. But seems to signal that yes, silver is cheap relative to gold at this point. Says as I write this article, the ratio stands at just over 80 to 1. That means it takes just over 80 ounces of silver to buy an ounce of gold. And here we see depicted graphically. We've touched upon that here, I suppose, back in September, and probably last saw back in October of last year. So it's not something that we haven't hit before. We've been slightly higher a little bit earlier in about a year ago or so, September last year-ish. To put that into perspective, the average in the modern era has been between 40 and 50 to 1. And here we see that depicted. Here's where it was. End of World War I, start of World War II. It's kind of seesawed around. 1968 gold crisis, 1950. Gold, silver, their first Gulf War, we were kind of up here. Volcker coming in, quantitative easing too, and here today we're on the rise. Says in simple terms, historically, silver is extremely underpriced compared to gold. At some point, you should expect that gap to close. In the summer of 2019, the silver-gold ratio climbed to nearly 93 to 1, and at the onset of the scamdemic, it rocketed to over 100 to 1. But as the Fed slashed rates and launched its massive quantitative easing program, gold rallied and took silver with it. Silver typically outperforms gold during a gold bull run. This was the case during the scamdemic, as gold pushed above $2,000 an ounce, a 39% gain. Silver rallied to nearly $30 an ounce, or a 147% increase. Meanwhile, the silver-gold ratio fell from over 100 to 1 to just over 64 to 1, close to the high end of the historical norm. With that spread widening again, we could be setting up for another big rally in silver. So here's some historical perspective. Geologists estimate that there are approximately 19 ounces of silver for every ounce of gold in the Earth's crust, with a ratio of approximately 11.2 ounces of silver to each ounce of gold that has ever been mined. Interestingly, the silver-gold ratio in ancient Egypt was 1 to 1. In 1792, the gold-silver price ratio was fixed by law in the United States at 15 to 1. France mandated a ratio of 15.5 to 1 in 1803. Faced with the challenges of a bimetallic monetary system with fixed exchange rates and the aftermath of a worldwide financial crisis, the U.S. Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1873. Following the lead of other Western nations, including England, Portugal, Canada, and Germany, this act formally demonetized silver and established a gold standard for the United States. With silver playing a smaller role as a monetary metal, the silver-gold ratio gradually spread. And since the world went to a total fiat money system, there seems to be some correlation between the silver-gold ratio and central bank money creation. During periods of central bank money printing, the gap tends to shrink. In fact, it plummeted in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis as the Fed engaged in extreme monetary policy. Currently, most analysts believe the Fed is about to embark on a war against inflation and significantly tighten monetary policy. As a result, gold and silver have both seen significant selling pressure despite an extreme inflationary environment. The markets are already pricing in tightening, and the silver gold ratio is widening. But the question is, can the Fed successfully raise interest rates high enough to stop the inflation train? Or will history repeat, with rising rates causing an economic meltdown that caused the Fed to pivot right back to 0% interest rates and QE? How you answer that question will dictate your view of the silver and gold markets. Peter Schiff's view is that the Fed is picking a fight it cannot win. If the Fed actually applied the type of monetary cure for its inflation problem, the whole economy would get a whole new disease, because we would have another financial crisis. You cannot fight off inflation by raising interest rates and tightening monetary policy without completely deflating the bubble. Of course, when that happens, the Fed will abandon the inflation fight and start setting more inflation fires. That's the only policy remedy the Fed has for a recession, for a bear market. It is to create inflation. You can't fight inflation and create inflation at the same time. So the markets still haven't figured out the dilemma that the Fed is in, and that ultimately, even if the Fed starts an inflation fight, is not going to win it. It's going to have to surrender because the collateral damage to the economy is politically unacceptable. Eventually, the markets will figure this out, and gold and silver will rally. The supply and demand dynamics also look good for silver. Investment demand has skyrocketed and supply is down. Industrial demand is rising. Mine output was hit hard by shutdowns due to the coronavirus scamdemic, but silver production was already on the decline with mine output dropping 4 straight years. Now may be the perfect time to take advantage of silver on sale. So there you have it, folks. In the words of Peter Schiff here, obviously, with this high inflation, the Fed kind of caught in between a rock and a hard place here. It would seem, at least according to Schiff, that silver is something to look at for investment purposes or transferability of your fiat currency into more hard assets. And so my recommendation is don't hesitate to give that a look. And probably it would be best to do that now before the SHTF, right? We don't want to be caught with our pants down like what's going on in Turkey, to where they flat out outlaw it, right? So aside from that here this morning, IBM and Samsung are jointly announcing a breakthrough semiconductor that uses 85% less energy. Interesting. Says, if you're like us, you've been wondering what the hell IBM has been doing for the last few years. Today, it looks like we may have part of an answer. Big Blue revealed this morning in a press release that it had been working jointly with Samsung and had achieved a breakthrough in semiconductor design that could reduce energy usage by 85%. The two companies announced jointly a breakthrough in semiconductor design utilizing a new vertical transistor architecture that demonstrates a path to scaling beyond nanosheet and has the potential to reduce energy usage by 85% compared to a scaled thin field effect transistor. The announcement comes in the midst of a global semiconductor shortage, which many believe may not end fully until 2023. The two companies' semiconductor innovation was produced at the Albany Nanotech Complex in Albany, New York, where research scientists work in close collaboration with public and private sector partners to push the boundaries of logic scaling and semiconductor capabilities, the press release said. The release listed some potential benefits for the breakthrough, including potential device architecture that enables semiconductor device scaling to continue beyond nanosheet. Cell phone batteries that could go over a week without being charged instead of days. Energy-intensive processes such as crypto mining operations and data encryption could require significantly less energy and have a smaller carbon footprint. continued expansion of Internet of Things and edge devices with lower energy needs, allowing them to operate in more diverse environments like ocean buoys, autonomous vehicles, and spacecraft. Dr. Mukesh Kar, Vice President, Hybrid Cloud and Systems, IBM Research, commented, "Today's technology announcement is about challenging convention and rethinking how we continue to advance society and deliver new innovations that improve life, business, and reduce our environmental impact." He continued, "Given the constraints the industry is currently facing along multiple fronts, IBM and Samsung are demonstrating our commitment to joint innovation in semiconductor design and a shared pursuit of what he called hard tech." And of course, we can read the full release there, but I think we kind of get the gist that obviously they're pushing the boundaries of semiconductor design, going from nanosheets, super, super, super tiny, to even smaller yet, and the added benefit of less energy usage, which I would say is not necessarily a bad thing. For those of us who stream, who put together videos and things of that nature that have to render stuff, obviously it's very process intensive and very taxing on the old PC. I can attest. And boy, if you've ever opened up a laptop here and see the size of the heat sinks on those puppies, holy moly, you can understand why the potential to try and reduce the amount of energy and obviously heat along with that. Perhaps they might be able to squeeze even more underneath the lids of these things, but nonetheless. Aside from that, air freight rates soared a record high amid California port crisis. Gee, who'd have thunk that would happen? President Biden's plan to save Christmas by declogging LA and Long Beach ports has failed. The number of container ships anchored off the coast remains near record highs, and wait times to unload cargo is around 3 weeks. Some importers have opted out of the usual containerized shipping via ocean vessels for air freighters to ensure their goods make it to store shelves in time for the holidays. Over the past 3 months, air freight rates on major shipping routes to and from China have doubled. Financial Times reports air freight rates between Shanghai to North America hit a record high of $14 per kilogram last week, up from $8 at the end of August. It even surpassed COVID highs of $12 when the entire world was using air freighters to ship medical goods worldwide during the early months of the scamdemic. Similar routes, such as Hong Kong to Europe and the U.S. and transatlantic routes between the Europe and North America, have experienced dramatic increases. And here we see the air freight rates. Blue is Shanghai to North America, Hong Kong to North America, up, up, and up. Hong Kong to Europe, Frankfurt to North America, also ticking upwards, but certainly from Asia to stateside here, it is going through the roof. Everyone knows if they want something on to the shelves before Christmas, they may have to use air freight, said Ingve Ruud, head of global air freight of Queen Nagel, one of the world's largest freight forwarders. Biden's effort to reduce dwell times is not working, even after he announced a new directive for the twin ports in mid-October to operate on a 24/7 basis. We noted at the time in a piece titled, "Here's the Truth Behind Biden's 24/7 Port Operations Pledge," that the move would not save Christmas. It now takes 21 days or 3 weeks for a vessel to enter the twin ports, and that's up from 7 in August. And there you see that depicted. It says widespread supply chain disruptions on major ocean shipping lanes have been a boon for air freighters. Top U.S. importers have switched to air freight for high-value items. The extra shipping costs via air are being passed on to the consumer through inflation. Some airlines have converted their planes into air freighters to take advantage of the heightened demand for the expedient but costly service. The cost of air freight will make some goods much more expensive this holiday season, as a relief for snarled supply chains might not be seen until the second half of 2022. So, gee, shocker, right? If you can't get it here by slow boat, it's going to come by air, and yeah, you're going to pay more for that. You're going to pay for all the extra expenses involved. Aside from that, vaccine mandates and the Great Resignation, the media pretends, well, there's no connection. How many of you guys have heard anything by way of the Mockingbird media suggesting that, hey, did you ever stop to think that perhaps all these mandates and decrees and edicts flowing through companies and corporations might just lead to people just saying, screw it, walk off the job, take this job and shove it? Crickets, right? This is a piece out of Mises Institute. Says, let me be clear from the start. I do not know the degree to which vaccine mandates have played a role in the massive voluntary exodus from the workforce. Says, I do, however, know that any true journalist would at least entertain the possibility that the two are correlated. Finding such a journalist proved to be a difficult task. ABC, Clown News, CBS, The Washington Compost, Reuters, CNBC, The Atlantic, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, The Hill, Business Insider, Fortune, Financial Times, Vox, Market Watch, and even right-wing publishers like the New York Post and Fox Business have all covered the mass resignations without so much as a mention of vaccine mandates. The Washington Compost, citing a single anecdote, went so far as to suggest that unvaccinated workers are causing others to quit by making them feel unsafe. And apparently there's a quip out of said article. Final straw is finding out that a recently hired dishwasher working in tight quarters with his son without a mask was not vaccinated. Oh, the sickness, the ridiculousness of it all. Time magazine, to their credit, at least addressed the possible relation and tried to provide a counterpoint, citing employee vaccination numbers in the high 90% ahead of mandates. Like Washington, where University of Washington hospital employees are 97% vaccinated, sounds great. They just forgot to do a follow-up piece after the mandate went into effect, when Washington lost 3% of its 63,000 state employees in a single day. That's a sizable percentage when you consider that their monthly separations, their terminations and quits, are typically 3 to 4% in the U.S., and this drop occurred in one day. Not to mention these separations are added to routine employment frictions. Now, let's discuss the awfully interesting correlations between the announcements of vaccine mandates and the Great Resignation. U.S. workers set another new record for quitting their jobs, rate at which U.S. non-farm workers are voluntarily leaving their jobs. In 2022, they expect that to be about 3%-ish. And obviously, you can kind of follow that through all the way back pre-2002. The U.S. has clocked 2 consecutive all-time highs for the percentage of workers quitting within a single month, 2.9% for August and 3% for September. Data released on a 2-month delay. This coincided precisely with an onset of highly prominent vaccine mandate announcements within the private and public sectors, one of the earliest being Google on July 28th, which inspired a tsunami of corporate signaling throughout the month of August. In a similar fashion, California set the trend for a series of state-level mandates, most of which were announced in August, with enforcement to begin in late September and October. August was indeed the first month in which this topic seeped into mainstream public discourse, the buzz increasing in September as Biden announced the mandate for federal employees. Right off the bat, this seems like a coincidence worth mentioning, yet none of the outlets listed above did. But there's more. Historically, upswings in resignations have correlated with commensurate upswings in hiring. And as businesses hire more, workers have freedom to shop around. However, we are not seeing that this time around, with total hires increasing by 7.5% between March and September 2021, and quits increasing by 24.3% during the same period, a threshold margin. And we see hires and quits in the thousands here. Employment, hires versus quits there. You kind of read that across the board there. Says now, let's pivot to look at 2 states that are handling mandates very differently. Colorado enacted one of the strictest vaccine mandates, while Arizona became the first state to enact a private sector ban on vaccine mandates. Colorado subsequently broke its all-time record for highest quit rate ever recorded with 3.4%. To quote the Denver Post, "What is unusual about the new record high is that it coincides with a still relatively high 5.9% unemployment rate in Colorado in August. Normally, elevated unemployment and people voluntarily jumping ship don't go hand in hand. For example, when Colorado's unemployment rate was at 5.9% in January 2003, the quit rate was 2.6%, and it was 2.7% in January 2014, another month with 5.9% unemployment. In September, Colorado shattered this record with an adjusted quit rate of 4.3%, the raw rate of 4.7%, and meanwhile, Arizona was one of only 4 states to experience a decline in the raw quit rate moving from July to August, and it did so by the greatest margin. The raw rate continued to decline in September. So, out of the 50 states, Arizona is demonstrating some of the strongest data contrary to the Great Resignation trend. Lastly, let's shift our focus to what the unvaccinated holdouts are saying. According to a recent survey by the Kaiser Family Foundation, 72% of workers vow to quit if they are not given the option to test weekly, and 37% say they will quit even with testing. And here we see said poll right there. It says more than a third of unvaxxed workers say they would leave their job if their employer required vaccination or testing, rising to 7 in 10 if no testing option was available. So surely, some of these vows will prove stronger than others, but we should note this poll was conducted between October 14th and 24th. These folks are not included in the resignation data we saw in August and September. Remember, most mandates were not officially in effect during those months, with the largest mandate of all, Biden's private sector mandate, still to come. If these poll respondents stay true to their word, this could equate to a 5 to 9% exodus from the workforce, on top of what we have already seen. This will only get worse if religious exemptions are removed, as is becoming increasingly mainstream. Again, this is not proof that vaccine mandates are the primary cause of the Great Resignation, just evidence that they are likely playing a role. This is an important message to the publishers at big corporate media outlets. Conveniently, leaving these discussions out of your articles will not persuade readers these topics are unrelated. Instead, it will cause them to question how a quote-unquote journalist could publish such negligent reporting. This type of behavior will only foster more distrust in mainstream institutions. Gee, is there any trust left in them still to this day? I didn't even think there was. I suppose they can probably go a little bit lower than whale poop, but hey, whatever. Says there's another more sinister symptom of this cognitive dissonance. It absolves political leaders of accountability. Given unemployment is a major bipartisan issue, average citizens might oppose mandates if they thought it would impede searching full employment. Take New York, for example, where they revoked religious exemptions to the vaccine for healthcare workers on November 22nd, while recently New York nurses publicly complained about staffing shortages, calling them a dire nursing shortage. Now, you would think the governor might adjust her course of action upon hearing this. But in this made-up world where vaccine mandates have zero impact on employment, our leaders can get away with callous policy decisions like this. And of course, we've talked about this on the broadcast here, that these people have cut their nose to spite their face, and in enacting all these mandates, policies, ridiculous as they are, what's happened? They've had to wheel in the National Guard because of shortages. Well, gee, what do you think was going to happen? Now, last but not least, financially here this morning, initial jobless claims rebound from 52-year lows. So after dropping to its lowest since 1969 in the prior week, the number of Americans filing for jobless benefits for the first time rebounded last week to 206,000 from an upwardly revised 188,000. This was worse than the expected 200,000. Missouri and Kentucky saw the biggest increase in claims, while New York and Texas showed the biggest drop in claims. And mind you, keep in mind what just went through Missouri and Kentucky here just a weekend ago. Don't know if people would already be jumping to unemployment lines that quickly if their town's been leveled or perhaps suffered any level of damage, but something to consider there. And overall, the number of Americans on some form of dole rose back near 2.5 million. And there we see that depicted. Says, but remains near pre-COVID levels. And so we've got a slight uptick there, regular state claims, etc., etc. Obviously, the problem is not jobless claims. The problem is the 4 million plus Americans that just cannot find a fit in the current post-COVID labor market. And yeah, I suppose if companies, corporations are still carrying forward despite court rulings, hey, thou shalt be jabbed or thou shalt be tested, perhaps that article we just finished up obviously may have a little bit of an effect. People are saying, screw it. Why work for the man when you can work for yourself, right? All right, so that being said, before I switch over here, how many of you guys knew that yesterday was the 230th birthday of the Bill of Rights? Anyone? Any takers? Well, indeed it was. So that being said here, I think what I will do before I switch over, I'll let this short little PSA play through, and then we'll come back. We'll get into some of the storm damage and that occurred here on the back part of the show here this morning and get into what played out here last night across several of the states. So stick around, to be right back. Article 1. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Article 2. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Article 3. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Article 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Article 5. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces, or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Article 6. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Article 7. In suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. Article 8. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. Article 9. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Article 10. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. This is your Bill of Rights. Know your rights. Exercise your rights. Defend your rights. Or forever lose your rights. This has been a PSA by Breaking Spectre. All right, welcome back, everybody. A little bit of a pause there. Hopefully, that was a little refresher for you for those that might have forgotten what our rights are. And as alluded to there, exercise them, use them, defend them, or forever lose them. That's the mantra here after 230 years of the Bill of Rights existence. So, as alluded to yesterday on the broadcast, I talked briefly at the onset that we had quite warm weather for this time of year, this 15th day of December yesterday. And I said, boy, I sure hope we don't see a repeat of what we just saw play out Friday night into Saturday. But sure enough, it did. And those that were following on the 5x5 channel yesterday know that I broke in at the very end after Pixels and 412 finished up to kind of give a little bit of a heads up as to what was playing out. Followed one of the guys on YouTube who's been doing an exceptional job here as of late. I think the guy literally picked up probably 180,000 subscribers net on his channel from Friday forward. I think he picked up almost 30,000 last night. If you've never heard of him, Ryan Hall Y'all's channel on YouTube has just done a bang-up job here. Spent, I think, roughly 8 hours tracking all these storms with all the warnings and whatnot, giving heads up. And the dude had a chat flying by about as fast as RSBN, so it must be doing something right. But nonetheless, as breaking tornado warnings were issued in the Midwest from Iowa to Nebraska and Kansas. That's a piece out of Todd Starnes. Says National Weather Service issued tornado warnings Wednesday across the Midwest, including Iowa, Kansas, and Nebraska. Tornado watch is also in effect in Minnesota, Missouri, South Dakota until 8 p.m. Weather.com reports a massive storm that has already produced damaging winds over 100 miles an hour or more in Colorado, northern New Mexico, and into parts of Kansas. A squall line of severe thunderstorms is currently racing through the Missouri Valley with damaging winds and embedded tornadoes. Tornadoes have been spotted in central and eastern Nebraska. And I don't know if there's actually a count of how many tornadoes actually touched down in this squall that came through last night or not. Have not seen that. And a lot of this stuff I was pulling late last night trying to just see what was out there. But multiple tornado warnings being issued across parts of Nebraska. Siren sounding in parts of Nebraska as multiple tornado warnings have been issued. Some of these storms moving at 95 miles an hour. Pretty quick moving stuff. Tornado siren sounding in Lincoln, Nebraska. Issued, let's see, reports trees and power lines down. Storms are currently moving around 93 miles an hour. Take shelter immediately. This was last night about 3:30, 3:40-ish time frame. National Weather Service tornado issued for parts of Iowa, Kansas, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, South Dakota until 8 p.m. So a pretty wide path of counties there. Chris McBee says numerous tornado warnings with this fast-moving arc of storms in Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas. And of course, like I mentioned, this Ryan Hall guy had pretty much the same sort of setup on screen with all the boxes and that for all the various warnings and whatnot, lit up like a Christmas tree. Here's something you don't see every day. Tornado and severe thunderstorm warnings stretching from South Dakota to southern Kansas, and snow squall warnings only 120 miles behind it. Yeah, that was pretty crazy. Snow and that on the backside. We saw that through some of his storm chasers net. Storms have hit the western border of Iowa. Gusts nearing 90 miles an hour and lots of tornado warnings. Get ready, Iowa. 6 tornado warnings in effect as of 4:17 p.m. yesterday. And it says a scene in Lamar, Colorado, captured by Don Stearman, and they actually had a huge dust storm in that pickup on the backside of this. So this storm, crazy for this time of year. One, we saw snow on the backside of it. We saw dust storms on the backside of it, and it sparked off some fires net apparently down in Kansas City, Kansas, and we'll get into that here momentarily as well. So crazy system blow through. Over to 9 and 10 news. A lot of people have asked, it says, December tornadoes, how rare is it really? A lot of people scratching their heads wondering, why are we seeing tornadoes in December? And again, I've alluded to this here, I think, on the Saturday show, if you picked it up, talking about this, that indeed we have seen December storms, and that here where I'm at in central Illinois. Not too far long ago, back in 2014, we had a storm come through. Ended up being about an EF3, and literally spent probably about the next month cleaning up debris, doing a lot of volunteer work with various churches and organizations and that at the time. So I would say we're kind of used to it here in Tornado Alley. Regardless of what time of year, if you get some pretty warm temperatures this time of year, you can pretty well bank on the fact that the temperature is going to drop and you're going to have some pretty unstable air, and probably just expect it. The bottom line says December in Michigan usually means holiday cheer, snow, and cold weather in northern Michigan. Not everyone will get snow, often a secondary severe weather season in the fall and the winter, but what about December? It says according to the National Climatic Data Center, the United States has 24 tornadoes in December on average. And apparently, these are the states where we've seen December tornadoes in the past. We had a couple, probably as north as, I would say, probably Missouri through the Midwest here. Typically, we might see some storms that swing across the southern states, especially. I think, what's it been? Maybe a few years ago, 3 to 5 years ago, we saw some late fall time, perhaps early wintertime storms go through Mississippi, Alabama in the past. It says in years past, December has nearly reached 100 tornadoes. Here's a look at the top 5 years of the most tornadoes in December. Apparently, back in 2002, we had 98. As far back as 1982, we had 97. 2015, 2018, and 1967 to kind of round things out, where we had about 60. December is a preliminary tornado count of 80 tornadoes as of Wednesday. After the deadly tornado in Mayfield, Kentucky, questions arose. Where do tornadoes occur in December? What is the longest track in history? And do long track tornadoes happen in December? Says tornadoes typically occur in the Deep South and Mississippi Valley. The tornado outbreak on Friday, December 10th, was a tad out of the norm. Below are the tornado reports, the red squares. Says these reports are a touch farther north than the climatological average. The pink states are where December tornadoes occur on average, at least according to the 10-year average. So yes, we did see, a little bit of a swing more northerly than in the past, but I wouldn't say it's too terribly outrageous. The next question is, what was the longest tornado path in history? The longest damage path in history is the Tri-State tornado on March 8, 1925. The tornado tore through 3 states, Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana, leading to 218 miles of damage. According to the National Weather Service in Paducah, the tornado was rated an F5 with winds exceeding 200 miles per hour. The tornado is the deadliest single tornado in history, with 695 deaths and over 2,000 injured. And apparently, here's the path of destruction from March 18th, 1925, how it kind of tore across the very southern tip of Illinois up into Indiana, starting back in Missouri. Pretty long path, obviously. So lastly, do long track tornadoes happen in December? In short, there is not enough data to support a yes or no answer to this. Modern day technologies such as satellites, dual pol radar, and cameras have led to more ground truth of tornadoes. Meteorologists know that long track tornadoes are very rare in the typical spring severe weather season. Here are some of the longest track tornadoes in history, according to the Storm Prediction Center, including the Quad State tornado from Friday, December 10th. It says Tri-State March 1925, it was a 219-mile path. Georgia, April 1969, was 217 miles. Mississippi in February of 1971 was 202. And Mississippi to Alabama, March 1966, also coming in at 202 miles. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the one over the weekend here was right at the 200-mile length, if I'm not mistaken here, remembering my facts. But Friday's tornado was a worst-case scenario as it happened after dark for many. It is likely to break the record. Okay, here we go. Likely to break the record for the longest tornado path, roughly 250 miles of damage. The worst of the damage was in Mayfield, Kentucky. And there we see the path again, starting out in Minnesota, or Missouri rather, cutting across, or actually clear back to Arkansas, up through Missouri. Looks like it cut across just that little corner of Tennessee up into Kentucky before it finally kicked off up around, maybe around Evansville area, I suppose. So those tornadoes are once again in a forecast Wednesday, December 15th. Meteorologists are forecasting wind gusts of 75 to 100 miles an hour and a few strong tornadoes from Minnesota to Iowa. It is also a unique situation. There is snow on the ground where the risk of severe weather is. And here again, we see the big path of where some of the storm hit. And then, of course, on top of that, they had a severe risk with 3 to 6 inches of snow already on the ground in some of these parts. No severe thunderstorms locally, however. A weather alert day is in place through Thursday due to strong damaging winds. Check out the latest forecast here. So, quick rundown on some of the deadliest storms in December in history. And flashing forward, we see December storm damage photos. This out of KCCI 8 out of Des Moines. Little slideshow here of some of the damage. Downed power lines and that across the interstate. I'm assuming that's probably I-80 here. Pictures of said tornado. I guess this must be around tornado south of Jefferson there. Let's see here. Also, some structural damage, obviously, some levelings. More pictures of the tornado on ground. Let's see, this is near ICYMI, Iowa. Let's see, Guthrie Center, Iowa. Some roofs ripped off. More structural damage. Machine shed north of Atlantic, Iowa. Let's see here. Also, Osceola, Iowa. More damage, trees uprooted. And more of the same near Greenfield, Iowa. I believe most of this is on the western side of Iowa. Damage in Aurelia, blowing some train cars off the tracks, that sort of thing. So obviously we can see the effects of the high winds. Flashing over to CBS Minnesota. Minnesota weather. Historic December storm brings 2 possible tornadoes. Temps will drop on windy Thursday. Out of Minneapolis, a rare winter thunderstorm possibly whipped up 2 December tornadoes in Minnesota Wednesday night, an unprecedented event in recorded state history. The National Weather Service said it will send 1 team to Freeborn and possibly Faribault County in Minnesota on Thursday to determine whether damage was caused by a tornado or straight-line winds in the Heartland area. A crew will also be assessing possible tornado damage in Plainsview, Minnesota, and Wisconsin crews will determine damage in Eau Claire County. If it's determined that it was a tornado, it will be assigned a strength rating. Preliminary results are expected by late afternoon. It says our next challenge could be rain-soaked roads that ice over just in time for Thursday morning commute. Ann Meyer with the Minnesota Department of Transportation says crews will have to wait before treating the roads. One big challenge with this particular storm is we can't pre-treat when it's raining. That material will wash away, Meyer said. After the rain, Minnesota DOT will move in before things freeze over by early Thursday morning. Here in the Twin Cities metro, crews are going to staff up around midnight, Meyer said. We could also see some debris on roadways, and that commute in the morning could be challenging. As of late Wednesday night, Xcel Energy said more than 7,000 customers were without power, with 5,800 of those in southeastern parts of the state. Strong winds continued into Thursday with gusts around 40 miles an hour across the state. A wind warning will be in effect through 6 a.m. for much of Minnesota, and a winter storm warning will be in effect for much of northern Minnesota. About 1 to 3 inches will fall north of Interstate 94, and the Twin Cities may get a quick dusting too. Snow showers should wrap up by the afternoon. And there's some more pictures and videos in that update as of 8:40 last night. Xcel Energy is reporting that over 9,000 customers in Minnesota are without power, backing up to 8:15 p.m. Emergency officials were saying a storm cutting across southeastern Minnesota had produced a tornado near Plainview. And there we see some of the radar and the warning boxes in that as of 8:15 p.m. last night. Update at 8:02 p.m. More tornado warnings have been issued for southeastern Minnesota and western Wisconsin. And here we see some more of the radar boxes, etc., etc. And this backs all the way up to, I think the warnings were coming through as of, let's see here. How far down does this go? 6:40 p.m., 6:10 p.m., 6 p.m., 5:28 p.m. Looks to be 5 o'clock-ish, 4:18, 3:20 p.m. So they had been tracking us for quite some time, obviously, by way of the various tweets and whatnot. So obviously they were kind of expecting it, and pretty uncommon to see storms of that nature, especially tornadic activity in parts like southern Minnesota. So aside from that, some high winds and severe storms hit the Kansas City area on Wednesday. Some pictures here. Let's see here. We got some structural damage in that. Tree collapsed at a house on 73rd Street and Switzer Road due to the thunderstorm. Let's see here. Some more damaged debris blowing around Kansas City, Missouri, Wednesday afternoon. Looks like perhaps maybe a trampoline got thrown up on somebody's roof there. Heavy winds, severe storms caused tree to tip over in Lenexa. Let's see. More tree damage there in Overland Park home. Tree fell over in North Kansas City yard on Wednesday. Let's see, trampoline overturned in Kansas City, Kansas. Those things are a flight risk. A shed was damaged during severe thunderstorms in the Kansas City area. Let's see, more tree damage there in Brookside. More damage in Brookside. Damage at the downtown airport. Not sure what all that yellow stuff is. Maybe that's insulation that got blown out of a shed of some sort. Let's see here. Downtown airport damage. Yeah, looks like maybe they had some steel ripped off the side of a building somewhere. Oh, a block window in that damage inside of a home in Overland Park. And of course, perhaps maybe on top of the storm from the sky before landing at Kansas City International Airport. So big thunderheads. My guess probably up north of the 10,000 foot level, I suppose. Aside from that, KLKN TV had update reports of tornadoes in Nebraska. Let's see, this came through late last night. Some pictures here. Damage to cars, trees falling over, structural damage, roofs blown off. Let's see, more structural damage. Machine sheds and that had some of their roofs peeled off. More structural damage over at a farm. Let's see, courtesy of Connie Robertson there. Uprooted tree, Christina Dant. Let's see. Let's see. We got some hail on that must have preceded the storm coming in. More structural damage. Another trampoline that got mangled. Play sets and things knocked over. More trees. Let's see here. Thought there was another picture of some hail. Maybe that's in another article, but a lot of tree damage, things of that nature. This out of Lincoln, Nebraska, a developing story. Snow squall warning is in effect for Buffalo, Dawson, Gosper, and Phelps counties until 5:30 p.m. Windy conditions in conjunction with snowfall may create whiteout conditions in the region. We do not expect snow in Lincoln. Lincoln police asked those who must be out to treat all intersections with no functioning traffic lights as a four-way stop. Best to avoid the area and stay off the roads to allow first responders to respond to calls and minimize risk. And let's see here. Lancaster County is in a tornado warning. Seek shelter if you're in the area with 93-mile-an-hour wind gusts being recorded at the Lincoln Airport. Reports of power lines down near West Van Dorn in the vicinity of the correctional facility. Currently a tornado warning in northwest Lancaster County. Adams County Emergency Management reports a few tornadoes in air south of Hastings around 2 p.m. yesterday. So you can see that this pretty well started across the plains yesterday early, and of course picked up steam and ended up dying out even here, even after I got off the broadcast yesterday over on the 5x5 channel, the winds had already picked up here, and we're well in front of the storm. At the time, we were seeing about 30-mile-an-hour sustained winds, and I don't think a lot of that really died down until after about midnight last night. Adams County Emergency Management reports few tornadoes. Let's see. According to Adams County Sheriff in the area that reported tornado sightings, there's an overturned semi at Highway 6 in Adams Central. So, yeah, traveling billboards in those cases. Live dash cam view near York, Nebraska. So, yeah, lots of damage, even all the way back to Nebraska. First December tornado watch issued, historic severe thunderstorm outbreak by evening. This out of Star Tribune. Threat is real. Wind damage across parts of southern Minnesota, southwest Wisconsin by evening from straight-line winds and isolated tornadoes can't be ruled out. Storms arrive between 6 and 9 p.m. and may be severe as far north as the Twin Cities, possibly parts of central Minnesota. And of course, we see the squall and that blowing through. I believe that they call that a derecho effect, something along those lines. So lots of punch to those winds. How can this happen with snow on the ground? Potentially record warmth coupled with high water levels for December and strong dynamics aloft. Powerful twisting winds called wind shear capable of causing thunderstorms to spin like a top. It's the spinning thunderstorms that Doppler radar picks up. And I suspect there will be severe storms and possibly even tornado warnings for parts of southern Minnesota and southwest Wisconsin by the evening hours. Surreal, that's the way they described it. These storms will move at 60 to 75 miles an hour. Most of us will not experience severe weather, but the farther south you live from the Twin Cities, the greater the odds of wind damage. This is historic. There has never been a reported tornado in Minnesota during the month of December. We aren't thinking about severe storms or certainly tornadoes 10 days before Christmas. Text or call a friend who may be in the path of these storms later today. Sustained winds may surpass 60 mile an hour for a time tonight. And again, there was the risk bubble, I guess. Surreal bullseye for any month. Typically, December NOAA SPC has a moderate risk of severe weather for much of southeastern Minnesota, with a slight risk extending into the Twin Cities. Moderate risk usually means tornadoes and fairly extensive straight-line wind damage. I would think twice about evening plans. And a slushy finish. Cold air on the backside of tonight's wild storms will turn the rain to snow with a few inches over central Minnesota, possibly plowable 4 to 8 inches amounts from near Alexandria to Walker and the Arrowhead. Something for the entire family today. Forecasted snowfall by midday tomorrow. So bottom line, the weather was nuts. And over to northeast Kansas, storm damage, more downed trees, things of the like. Widespread storm damage has been recorded all across northeast Kansas. There we see some more of the damage, and I'll drop the link to this if you guys wish. You can check out about 4,000 photos of storm damage. Crazy. A lot of, I suppose, submissions net from various viewers and whatnot. But lots of damage net reported. But let's see, just a quick couple, 2, 3 or so through here. Yeah, we got some overturned buildings. Let's see here. Where's the clicker on this guy? Yeah, machine sheds, steel buildings, things of that nature ripped up. Let's see, fences blown over. Yeah, sheds blown over. Pretty typical type stuff. Not anchored down. Looks to be damage at a gas station, or I guess maybe that's a Sonic, I guess. Drive-in, Manhattan, 1215, my home and others. Trees down. Yep, pretty typical. 30 by 10, horse run, barn demolished. Junction City, branch down on lines. Roof damage. Tree in my backyard snapped in two. Tin blew 3/4 of a mile. Other buildings damage in the Clifton area. So again, there's about 4,000 photos. If you wish to peruse those, you can. And last but not least, windstorm updates. Over 100,000 remain without power in Kansas. Recovery expected to take days. says over 108,000 Evergy customers remain without power, officials said Wednesday night, and it is expected to be a multi-day effort to restore services to areas without service. Chuck Casely, Senior Vice President and Chief Customer Officer for Evergy, said at a press conference that as the storms peak, over 200,000 residents in the company's service area were without power. The storms, he said, produced gusts of up to 85 miles an hour, golf ball sized hail, and severe thunderstorms across central and eastern Kansas. All of this created some of the most widespread damage across our service territory that Evergy has ever seen, Casely said. And here we see the storm update experiencing a high number of outages related to extreme wind. Restoration times are unavailable at this time due to the extent of the storms. Expect delayed restoration times. Evergy says it's facing a multi-day restoration of power. Over 1,100 workers, including contractors, are assessing damage and beginning to make repairs, though Casely said the company was still in the process of determining how to respond to the situation. Requests for assistance from utility crews in Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and Colorado had been made as well. Now think of that. You get all these power outages and that from this storm, and then think of what just blew through the states here Friday night into Saturday and how long it's going to take for restoration of power there. Uh, how many more storms can we handle before we pretty much have a depletion of folks that they can send around from various other states? Pretty taxing on the line workers and pole setters and things of that nature, I suppose. Residents should not expect service to be restored by Thursday morning or even by the end of the day Thursday, he said. This is absolutely going to be a multi-day restoration. They had high wind warnings end by 9 p.m. for Topeka. Dust and smoke from Kansas wildfires and windstorm was affecting Iowa. Wednesday's storm moved north and has carried dust and smoke from wildfires in central Kansas into Iowa. National Weather Service is urging people to stay inside. Officials begin to assess storm damage. Topeka's Frito-Lay sustains damage. So apparently one of their facilities had it opened up like a sardine can. Says just hearing reports of damage consistent with the winds, trees, limbs, power outages, etc., Nichols said in the text message. Similar work was underway in other surrounding counties. The Waubonsee County Sheriff's Office said most of the reports in the area were related to downed power lines. In Pottawatomie County, Sheriff Shane Yeager said a car had been blown over and there were light structural damage being reported. A lot of reported stuff. Right now we're trying to assess. Smoke smell from central Kansas fires. Apparently that was picked up and on the maps here blown as far as into Iowa. Interstate 70 reopens in both directions. As of roughly 5:40 p.m., Interstate 70 has been reopened in both directions. Kansas Department of Transportation said the interstate had been closed for much of the day in central and western Kansas due to high winds and low visibility. Motorists should continue to exercise caution, officials say, and other local roads may still be closed. So, quick and dirty run through of some of the damage from said storms yesterday. Let's hope that we don't get a repeat of that today as the storms continue to push through. Quick flash through the weather maps here again. Let's update this here one more time before we go. Let's see here, we got pretty much that same band of warm air pushing up through the Ohio River Valley still. This as of 10 a.m. now here, pushing east of, let's say, Indiana, Ohio, pushing across that way here. And you get this warm air coupled with this cold air on the backside. Again, let's hope that we don't see a repeat of that here tonight. Radar-wise, let's see here. Yeah, it looks like it's greatly minimized, but it's not to say that that thing won't pick up steam and gather a bunch of energy and écoutez et répétez, right? So we'll have to keep an eye on it. So stay tuned in that regard. But nonetheless, that's some of what took place here last night. As always, folks, appreciate you guys tuning in for the extended broadcast here today, covering some of the financials as well as the carnage, as it were, from the storms that blew through last night. And take care. God bless. If I don't see you before.